Hey, everybody. Welcome to 123rd week of these crazy webinars. And we got a special treat for you. 87,000 IRS agents are coming knocking on billionaires' doors. Oh, wait a minute. What is that? 120 per billionaire. It's crazy. Oh my gosh. We got plenty of crazy stuff to talk about today. Adam is moving his daughter into the dorm at UNC Chapel Hill.
Go Heels.
He's doing that. We've got John McCarty. He is being such a good soldier. I really appreciate the fact that he's here because he's actually on a little break, taking his wife to see her favorite band in Atlanta, which is so cool. I admire you for doing that, John. That's a good thing. But thank you for joining us. And Jack Santaniello is back. And we're so thrilled to have him back. And I figured, Jack, you can take us through some of the highlights of this. Oh, I'll bet you. All right. I'm looking at the Q&A without looking at it. And here's I need to do the great Kevorkian or whatever. Karnak, not Kevorkian. The chat is disabled. Let's see. Yes, it is. Okay, yeah, we're good. All right, everyone can now chat. Where would we be if we didn't have Papa Joe to keep us honest, man? I just don't know. Thank you, Joe. It's always good to have you on here. But I just thought, before Jack jumps into, he's going to give us an overview of this bill, which, unless we have a hand of God, with a handball that instant replay doesn't see, this sucker is going to go rubber stamp through the rest of the Congress. And Joe, when he gets off of Kiowa Island, will come back and rubber stamp that too. But, I just thought it was interesting. So, Joe Biden said that, don't worry about these 87,000 IRS agents. They're going to be focused on billionaires. Well, there's 724 of them. So that is 120 IRS agents per billionaire. That seems like that makes sense. The next logical thing, if that doesn't make sense to anybody, there are 22 million millionaires. So that's 232 one agent per 232, or 32.5 small business owners. That's what I'm worried about. That's one agent for every 367 businesses. So I'm not saying this to scare anybody. I'm just saying, hey, this is kind of a reality. And the reality is they're going to be going for where the money is. And the billionaires are pretty good about sheltering taxes. Just ask Elon Musk, ask Donald Trump, ask anybody, but the millionaires and the small business owners and on down, not so easy sometimes. So the point is, have your stuff buttoned up, because with the IRS, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And so that's just kind of the cold, hard reality of it all. So we're going to talk about what else is in this thing beside the 87,000 IRS agents, because there's stuff that will pertain to you as business owners. And, not a lot that we can do about it other than be prepared, do what we can. This train seems like it's left the station and it's rolling down the tracks. So, Jack, why don't you give us an overview on the Inflation Reduction Act?
All right. So, a lot of it actually is focused on the energy and excise taxes proposed in the actual act. And so that was part of the problem, is that it's, you talk about inflation reduction, but, what is the real focus of that? So I try to get a good overview of what it is, because depending on which channel you're on or who you're listening to. So this is kind of like an aggregation of the things that are in there. but I admittedly have not read line by line the act itself. So I'm going to give you a couple of the highlights. So essentially lowers energy costs for Americans, increases energy security, decarbonizes sectors of the economy, focuses investments into disadvantaged communities, helps revive certain rural communities. And so going into some of the details, and that is when we talk about inflation, I think are we in a recession or not? And I think that's really kind of like the first question, and there are varying opinions of that. And I think I mentioned this last week, is that if you look at gross domestic product, the GDP, then that kind of signals maybe that we are in a recession. If you look at gas prices, then maybe not. But then someone says, well, reduction in gas prices means more consumption because you have more disposable income. So it's kind of like a very circular effect. So very interesting about that. So let me jump into some of the executive proposals, or the executive summary of the proposals, which starting on the clean energy, it talks about electricity, reducing carbon, clean fuels, clean transportation, and renewable energy tax credits, excise taxes, and that pertains to fuel, but also things like prescription drug pricing and things like that. There are also, let's see, switch back to this other screen. As I have like a whole bunch of things up on my screen right now because there's so many.
I'm curious,
perspectives
Jack,
on it.
when it says this $700 billion thing is going to reduce energy costs, and yet I have friends that are in the oil and gas industry, and some of them ran huge petrochemical companies in Houston. They're saying their excise taxes and stuff are just going to increase energy costs. I'm curious, and I'm not trying to pick a political fight. I'm really not.
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand, how does an excise tax reduce energy costs, or what's the rationale? Because there are two sides of this coin. I'm just trying to understand. Did they talk at all about that?
Yeah, it is a shell game, and those are my words, which is that you tax on one side, but then you give credits on the other side. So it is, imagine that you have like a base structure for good behavior. And it's just kind of like, well, you're going to get it unless you engage in bad behavior. So it is, everybody gets it unless you do something bad, and then they deal with it. They're restructuring it. So imagine the difference between a annual salary and a bonus. So they're basically saying, well, we're not going to give you the salary. We're going to reduce the salary, but then increase your bonus based on good behavior. So that's what they're doing is that they're shifting it. Eventually, theoretically, it ends up in the same person's or the appropriate people's pockets, but it's in a different form. And therefore, so they're increasing the tax. But if you are a good actor, a good business person with respect to energy, then you get it back. If you don't behave appropriately, then you don't get it back. So increase taxes, but give the rebate to the appropriate people. So they're shuffling around the rebate side of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so one of those things, and I think we talked a little bit about that last week when Stephanie Daniels was your stunt double. By the way, she did a great job. So kudos to Stephanie Daniels. But if I remember correctly, you could get an EV or electric vehicle tax credit of $7,500. But if you're over, what is it, 300,000 or 200,000 in household income, something like that, you don't get it. So they're pushing people that probably would be stretched to buy $80,000 Tesla or more. If you're making under that threshold. Do you know what the threshold is? Either one of you guys?
I don't remember. No.
I do not know what the threshold is off the top of my head, but I will say on the bright side of things, there's some language in there about these credits being available for used vehicles in some aspects too. So that would be an interesting thing. That might extend to some of the lower income folks out there trying to purchase these vehicles, but I'm not sure. Those are allocated by the manufacturer. So, as with anything, the devil's in the details. So
Yeah.
when you're out there car shopping, you'd have to do your due diligence to see if you're going to get that credit.
Yeah, just
and
don't let the
I've-
battery go bad on you with that used vehicle. Have you seen any of those things?
Well, it's one. So I found a section in this report that talks about, with respect to credits for individuals and consumer products, it proposes to overhaul the clean vehicle credit, create a new $4,000 credit for previously owned clean vehicles. So create a marketplace for those. I mean, as a tangent, my wife had a company car that it was one of the first kind of battery hybrid sedans, and we thought about buying it. It's a very cool car. But that was exactly it. How much was the battery replacement and disposal cost, which was unknown at that time. So we decided not to buy that company vehicle for us. But and then there's other creating new credits for certain commercial clean vehicles, so not necessarily battery powered, but vehicles that meet higher emission standards and those kind of things, and bringing that technology to the lower end model vehicles, not just the higher end model vehicles too. So providing incentives, I think part of this package is to provide incentives, not just to consumers, but to the manufacturers to do the right thing.
Yeah, interesting. All right, that's good. Because hopefully that answers Papa Joe's question. I'll maybe John, maybe you could do a little Googling on what that threshold was on household income, and I can maybe do that too, but stay tuned on that one, Joe. Keep going, Jack.
So the other side of it, and when you have Republicans, or well, first of all, I think probably most people know kind of the recent history, which was it was 50-50. People voted on party lines. So the vice president had to break that tie in the Senate. And there was, and I was talking to Stephanie about this earlier this week, because when it passed or it got further along, she said she may have made the statement that she didn't think there was any way it was going to pass at all, based on what you all knew, or all of us knew last Thursday. And I said, well, yeah, but things have changed, and you have certain senators, Democratic senators, that were that I shouldn't say flipped, but they were more accepting, because there were some components, GOP components, that made it into the bill itself. And so there was at least they were okay with it. And then there's the other political pressure, which is, okay, they had to have a win with upcoming primary elections and just the midterm elections, generally speaking. And so this was, kind of deemed as a win on paper. But if you look through the economic impact of, and so here's a couple of quotes. So during nearly 19 hours of debate, so that's what happened prior to the vote, GOP lawmakers allege that the measure would worsen inflation at a time when prices are already rising. The tax provisions are a threat to workers and their wages, even though the bill would not raise rates on individuals. And they unleashed a battery of unsuccessful amendments that forced Democrats to take uncomfortable votes on issues including immigration. So, we talk about the economic aspects of the bill primarily, but there are other things that impact that are non-financial at its core. Obviously, immigration and having to deal with the socialization and providing for immigrants and illegal immigrants and all those issues that come up that have a monetary component to it. But this is, they're saying higher taxes, more spending, where's this money going to come from? You're just basically shuffling things around, and we, the US citizens and taxpayers, end up with the bill behind that, or the cost behind that, as do our kids and our grandkids down the road. So that's essentially both sides of it. I mean, we could get into further details about some things if you wanted to, but maybe wanted to get your perspective on what you see as well in there, just kind of generally speaking over the past 3 or 4 days.
So John found the information that Papa Joe's going to need. So John, can you walk everybody through that?
I'd be happy to. So for new vehicles, it's going to be limited to vehicles that have the MSRP of 55,000 or less. For SUVs and trucks, 80,000 or less. Those income limitations are correct. For individuals, 150 of income, and for married filing jointly, 300,000 of income. So that's gonna, I think they're trying to set the price of the car commensurate with the income level, but I think they may have missed a little on that one. Maybe they got a little closer on the used vehicles. For used vehicles, the credit is $4,000 or 30% of the price, but the car has to be a $25,000 or cheaper car. So that really is for the secondary market. And of course, as Jack brought up, who knows about battery life, but they're trying to create a secondary market for those cars. The income limitation though for those used cars is only 150 for joint filers. So that's really only going to be available for low income taxpayers, not for our business owners out there.
Yeah.
And I found, so Gary knows this, but like 30 seconds before we got on the air, my Google Chrome reset. And so I had all of these articles up ready to share with you in a particular order. So I found the one that I wanted to share with you that has some of the other stuff in it. So it is the Inflation Reduction Act is a slimmed down version of the Build Back Better bill. It makes the largest investment in combating climate change in U.S. history, lowers the cost of prescription drugs, and raises taxes on corporations. And then a little bit of the specificity. Creation of a 15% corporate minimum tax rate. So corporations with at least $1 billion in income will have a new tax rate of 15%. Taxes on individuals and households won't be increased. And then there's an excise tax in relation to stock buybacks by corporations, so redemptions. Prescription drug price reform. So Medicare can negotiate the price of certain prescription drugs, bringing down the price beneficiaries will pay for their medications. There will be a $2,000 cap on annual out-of-pocket prescription drug costs. To Gary's opening comment about IRS agents swarming around people, it says the IRS has been sounding the alarm for years about being underfunded and being unable to deliver on its duties. The bill invests $80 billion, that's with a B, billion dollars, in the nation's tax agency over the next 10 years. So yeah, the thought process that I know none of you on this call have gone through, which is, maybe I'll roll the dice and not get caught if that deduction maybe wasn't a good deduction. You may think twice about that. Although really, are they going to come after you for something like that? They're really targeting, even with the $80 billion, I mean, there is a limitation to what is going to get on their radar, at least and that's a Jack theory. So Affordable Care Act. So it's premiums that were subsidized under the federal government. The premiums are going to be reduced through subsidies. And then we talked about some of the energy security and climate change investments that are being made with respect to energy costs and investment in clean energy production and tax credits aimed at reducing carbon emissions. So, and we talked about the voting, how it passed the Senate. And then I think the House is, well, I think there's a vote tomorrow on the House floor because they've been out this week or not been fully in session this week. So tomorrow is a key date, and then it's going to pass, and then President Biden's going to sign it. So and then again, as I'm scrolling through, this is a Forbes article. It says, the title of the next section is "Study Shows Bill Will Likely Have No Impact on Inflation." So it's like, okay, it's the Inflation Reduction Act, and is it really going to have an impact on inflation? So there's a back and forth behind that as well. And like I said, sometimes just to get both sides of the story, or because I want to be entertained, I'll listen to Fox News, and then it's channel 114, and then CNN is 116. So or CNBC. I just switch back and forth. It's the same story, but you wouldn't think it. or I do that at home, or, and I wouldn't say that, that WFAE and WBT are diametrically opposed, but, obviously BT is
kinda.
Republican oriented. And then, yeah,
Kind of.
NPR is supposed to be more neutral, but yeah, so.
Yeah, no. So here's an interesting question. And I'll lead into it before I read Robert's, but Duke Energy makes billions, but shows humongous losses every year. So loss carry forwards. Does an AMT, is that 15% minimum tax apply, John, to someone like Duke Energy?
Yeah, well, so I'll comment on this whole kind of situation. So, first off, I'll say for most of the small business owners and business owners we work with, this is not in their neighborhood currently, because it's for companies who make $1 billion a year over the last 3 years. But it is a fundamental change, and the AICPA, our society of CPAs, is having a fit over it, because traditionally you have book income and you have tax income, and they're totally different regimes.
Yeah.
And in this case, they're introducing a 15% minimum tax on book income. And so it's just sort of this slippery slope, like what's next, what next are they going to figure income taxes on? And maybe it extends down to the lower levels. So that's the issue. And to your point on loss carryovers, and yeah, it could be years and years before some of these companies finally begin showing some income and paying some of the tax. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
So let's use Duke Energy as an example.
Sure.
If they've got losses,
Mm-hmm.
but are those I'm assuming those are tax losses, not real losses. You can't keep,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'd have to look back at the exact language, but you would figure tax under the normal regime, under the alternative minimum tax regime, and under this 15% of book income tax regime, and you're going to pay one of them, right? So, and the language was 15% of book income over some other things, and those did involve some foreign tax credits. So, this bill is so new, and it's beyond my pay grade yet. I'm gonna get there on it. And again, this is for huge companies. But I can imagine that, if it's possible, they'll figure out a way to weasel out of these. Specifically how, I don't know. But it is interesting that you will, they'll still figure, so those loss carryovers will be applicable for regular tax, but they may not be applicable for this new 15% of book income tax. So, there's a push and a pull here. They want to show strong book income for their investors, right? But then there's, that's going to have a detrimental impact, that it might increase their income tax expense. So who knows what effect that has on the stock market and everything else.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of unintended consequences in here, and unfortunately or fortunately, we're along for the ride, it seems, and we'll just try to get you guys as filled in as possible on it.
Well, one thing about it, Washington has some really good copywriters. When I was in advertising, we had this thing called Truth in Advertising, and you could get really heavily fined if you did not back it up. When my son was a shoe designer at Reebok, they had gotten fined for, it was like hundreds of millions, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It was humongous fine because they had this thing called the Easy Toner, and they were kind of these ugly shoes, quite frankly. But supposedly they were going to burn more calories because they weighed 10 pounds a piece or something. I don't remember, but they got fined because they had their data, but they didn't have independent data that proved it, and Truth in Advertising laws nailed them. But that doesn't happen with the naming of bills like this. So anyway, I digress. I mean, it is kind of crazy to see. And Jack, I like your approach. Like, go AM radio, to NPR. Like that's a pretty good. And then find some. Actually, I like listening to business shows because they kind of take some of the rhetoric out, like Fox Business, CNBC, and Fox Business has a little bit more right leaning, obviously, but there seems to be a little bit more like temperature based on facts. And all I really care about is how's it affect businesses.
Right.
Because that's the engine. So
Right.
next question from Joe, is there anything in the bill about clean water or water transference from flood prone areas to drought areas?
I don't
didn't
know.
see.
Yeah, I haven't looked to see if there was that detail. I know there was discussion because it came up in the context of it was someone who lives in a drought area, like out west. And it was kind of like, well, why would you think that we created this problem? And then someone said like Las Vegas, and it's like you bring water to the desert where in a place where it wasn't supposed to be in the first place, or it wasn't intended to be in the first place. But speaking of drought prone areas where we have invested in growing crops and those kind of things where you can't control the temperature necessarily, and so they spikes up and down, back and forth. So that's if that's the question, I think that yes, there is discussion about how we may transport that water and those resources to areas that do not have those resources, but I don't know the details of those. But I do, and I want to share my screen because I did find another one of the articles that disapparated 30 seconds before we started. And the first person to tell me where that word came from, then they get a $10 gift card.
Oh,
So he was paying attention.
I like that. Yeah, we missed that last week, Jack. And Stephanie was, those Duke people are evidently a lot more tightwads than you UNC Chapel Hill guys, because she didn't offer anything like that.
She didn't. Okay. Well, all right. So here we go. So here is, can you see that on your screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the breakdown of, and this is why they're saying it reduces the deficit. And there's actually a chart below this. So what you see is the cost, the savings, and this is, keep in mind, 10 years of time. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 2 years, 5 years. This is 10 years of pro forma formulations, essentially. So this is, and they broke it up, energy and climate. And this is the various components. So when we talk about, the incentives and things like that about conservation and those kind of things, this is, I would imagine that stuff is in there. Then we talked about healthcare. And so this is the spending and tax breaks, but then how are they going to pay for some of that? Because they can't pay for all of it. So you talk about, the drug rebate, price inflation cap, negotiating of prices, and then you have actual revenue. So this is that 15% tax we were talking about. This is, so let's spend money in building up the armed enforcement officials of the IRS, which is not true. I think when we had Andrew on here, he actually said he was one of the unarmed people. I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound as glamorous, but he didn't have a gun officially to carry around with him because he was on the civil side of things. Carried interest loophole closure, and then other revenue. So you have $790 billion. So here is the net deficit reduction. And then this is what might happen alternatively. But what I think is also interesting is down here, you talk about, okay, so if orange is the annual deficit reduction, and then the dotted line is what might otherwise be in an alternative universe without the bill. And this is the cumulative deficit reduction over the course of time. So over the 10 years is the way that, it's positive numbers, but it's meant to be, the chart is a negative perspective. So this is a reduction. So, looks good on paper. What is the reality for us? And as John said, the reality for most of us is not a whole lot of impact on certain aspects of the bill, at least directly, meaning, okay, now you're going to see an impact on your P&Ls and your balance sheets and your and those kind of things directly, but they're definitely going to have an impact. And they may have an impact on society in general and our behavior and how we do things. Like, okay, do we
Yeah.
have a choice of buying an energy efficient car, or do we continue on with gas guzzlers? I mean, I am, following my sword, I'm guilty of it. I have an 8-cylinder Tahoe. There's a reason for that. I had for hauling certain trailers and other stuff, but but now that my eldest is not in need of that kind of stuff, I may, my next car may be something a little more conservative and fuel efficient. As long as I have assurances that I'm not going to get stuck with, a $5,000 bill to replace a battery the day after it goes out of warranty, kind of thing.
Right.
So
Exactly.
all right.
It would
so-
be funny seeing you trying to pull that horse trailer with a Prius. Just saying.
Yeah, I would get very far, and I'm sure a lot of people would laugh, and maybe they feel sorry. Maybe that's the way to do it, is try that, and then people just feel sorry for you, and they're like, here, let me just take care of it for you.
Right.
So, yeah.
Hey, what about, so for anybody that was on last week, Stephanie was kind of putting her chips on the table. I don't think thing's going to pass because Cinema from Arizona is going to fall on the sword on this one thing. Well, the one thing I think they carved out. And can anybody talk about that? So she was wrong on the fact that, this ain't going to go anywhere. She was right on the fundamental concern that would derail it. Either of you guys can jump on that?
I think I can. From what I've read, her concern was with the carried interest rules.
Yes.
So if you're a partner and you provide services to that partnership, your piece of income at the end can be subject to long-term capital gains. It's very good for private equity. The provision, the negotiation was they wanted to shorten the holding period from 5 years to 3 years to be able to qualify for the carried interest treatment. And that was part of the compromise. Cinema did not like that, so they've left it at 5 years. So status quo on that. That was not, that was going to be a revenue raiser, and they swapped something out for it.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, it's last week, the gallery was pretty active. You guys have been pretty docile today. And so no takers on the $10 gift card yet, right?
Maybe they didn't hear me. I used the word disapparate instead of disappear. Come on.
Disapparate.
I know some of you have kids that watch the whole series of movies, and you don't have to admit that you can even.
Sounds like a Minions thing. Despicable Me.
Possible in some, they speak a lot of Spanish in Minions. And a lot of I was looking at something that was like these are all like a summary of all the adult humor in Minions, and it was like, yeah, I caught that. Nope, missed that one. So
that's funny.
And then when it came out, my kids were actually in Spain and they got to see it in Spanish. So
wow.
Then you kind of notice the English words. So I said, that's what I want to do, is I want to watch it in Spanish and see the translation of it, and then you hear the English words, or maybe Spanglish, I guess it would be at that point.
Right.
So
that's funny. So Robert Mayetta says Scooby-Doo. Is that a correct guess?
Nope, not that old.
Grasping for straws. You are dating yourself and us,
Yes.
Robert.
And it's not a cartoon.
Oh, not a cartoon.
Mm-mm.
Okay, interesting.
Or I should say animated. Guess that's the.
Oh, okay.
It's
All
not
right,
animated.
Well, so, any other thoughts from the gallery on this thing? Oh, by the way, Harry Potter.
Yes.
Joe.
Joe, okay, I'm gonna trust that you didn't Google that because there was like 30 seconds of space or longer. So
You know, he had to use his Google skills on this. I mean, I'm just suspecting there's some foul play, and it was the hand of Google.
or that you didn't ask Sean, and you didn't ask your grandkids either. So, under those circumstances, I will send you a $10 coffee card.
It was
No,
the
not
clue of not cartoon. Oh, okay. Well, I think we could trust Joe. If anybody hasn't listened to his episode on the Anything But Typical podcast, which we launched 2 weeks ago, listen to it because it really is a good one. And by the way, we launched a new one yesterday morning. Greg Arts, his father, Russell Arts, who started Computer Associates Technologies, really interesting family, man. That's an interesting story too. So that's on the Anything But Typical podcast. Shameless plug for the $0 that we derive from it, but it is really interesting. The stories that we unpack, it's really fun. Any other questions out there? While we're waiting on that, I'll show you guys what I just got from Adam. This is where he's at today. John, I think you picked wisely. I'm glad this isn't you. Let's see if you guys can see this.
U-Hauls. Mm-hmm.
Those
I've done
those
enough
days
of that.
those days aren't far off. I've got a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old. So
Yeah, your days are numbered, buddy.
yeah.
So are
What-
Jack's.
Here's a first-time freshman dad story. So we're talking about how this is going to go down in about 10 days. So next in 2 weekends. And I said, oh yeah, so I'll go get a U-Haul. Do we need a truck, or, can we put the trailer on the back of our truck? And they both kind of looked at me. My daughter and my wife was like, kind of like, what the hell are you talking about? Kind of look. And it's like, if it can't fit into 2 vehicles, like in the vehicles, it's not going. This is a dorm room, and you show up, you get like 30 minutes to unload, and there's students that will help you do it. But at the 31st minute, you are politely asked to move your vehicle elsewhere. They don't care well, they do care where. I mean, off campus essentially, or somewhere in a visitor parking lot that you have to find your way back to the dorm room kind of thing. So yes, I guess maybe years down the road, it'll be a U-Haul kind of thing, but not for us this year. I do want to share, some statistics that are sort of, I mean, they're related to the inflation and other things, but dealing more with, so the statistically, annual consumer inflation dipped to 8.5% in July after hitting the 40-year high of 9.1%. So to kind of put some numbers into perspective. And, gas prices obviously started coming down. CPI, according to Department of Labor, reported yesterday that it's an uptick of 0.2% in inflation. Or they had been expecting a 0.2% inflation, but it actually is going in the opposite direction. Department of Labor is showing that the index for energy was 32.9% in July, was 32.9% annually, falling from 41.6% in June. So it's saying that, and that's usage. So the prices have caused a reduction in usage. So my point earlier was that as we continue to reduce prices, usage increases, and therefore, and you don't have to pay as much for gas, so you can allocate it to other stuff. So does that cause a rebounding effect in inflation? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see, other indices. Yeah, okay. So statistically, gas prices, national average for gas is now $4.01, down from $5.01. So you hear about $1 reduction. It was weird. It was a period of time where the gas at the Ballantine BP was less than gas in South Carolina. And that
Really
happened for like for like 2 weeks or so. And I kept checking. I'm like, surely this isn't correct.
That's unusual.
Yeah. And then using the Harris Teeter discount at the BP, I was like, ooh, we're back to, several years ago of where the prices are, but short-lived. And then it seems like it's rebalanced. I don't know if it was a temporary holiday to Mecklenburg County taxes. I didn't hear anything about that. So I don't know why there was this disparity that they were so, because usually I think it's about maybe 20 cents or so, the differential between North Carolina and
Yeah.
South Carolina. So I'm always down in Indian Land filling up on my way home. And then as far as hiring picked up predominantly in the food and beverage industry. So statistically, food services and drinking places added 74,000 jobs in the month. Now employ 11.7 million workers. There's still $600,000 workers short of where the industry was in February of 2020, but that was obviously before COVID. So,
Right.
and I don't think that we'll get to the same place, even if we were to fill the positions, because I think that if and hopefully those of you who are in retail did, and I don't like you were using the word pivot, but it's true that you adjusted your business model to accommodate more deliveries and more pickups kind of thing, rather than in-store dining. That's obviously coming back, but I think people have been accustomed to that they can push a button. And now when they can't do that, and I've done this myself personally, is like, okay, wait a minute, I can't pay for this online. They're not going to tell me it's going to be ready in 40 minutes. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the next one because I want some assurances that
you've been
you know,
conditioned.
so yeah, and it's just, yeah, exactly. It is conditioning. And because there is that opportunity to have a little more certainty that, okay, I know when I have to leave the house versus sitting in a parking lot somewhere or arriving late and the food is cold kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I prefer to have a little more assurances of quality and warmness of food. So those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, overall, it seems like things are reviving for the most part, but there's still a long way to go for all sectors of businesses, essentially.
So we just got a question in here from Bruce. Bruce, you are faithful on bringing great questions to us. Robert Mayetta, same way with Joe. But here's the question. Looking forward, there have been research articles on the losses the public and private pension funds have been experiencing. On the public pensions, it appears that the cash balances states, local, and local governments build up with the federal funds may now be necessary to cover pension fund deficiencies. If I could just read, is this likely the case that the COVID funds will be diverted to pension funds rather than services to citizens overall? That's a good question. I don't know.
I've got I guess a little comment on it. And I guess it would depend on the stipulate. So I guess we're referencing the federal dollars that went to the states under COVID legislation, and it would depend on the stipulations, that came along with those federal dollars. But if you think about it, money's fungible. And if the states have unfunded liabilities, they're going to have to raise the revenue somewhere. So they're either going to take it, if they can take it from the COVID money, they could, or they would raise taxes, or they would cut services. But if these, are truly unfunded pension liabilities of the state, they're going to have to be either they're going to have to be satisfied somewhere, or unfortunately, the retirees are going to have to take a haircut on their benefits. I mean, it's just simple math, right? So that's my thought on that, is that I don't know how bad the unfunded liabilities are, but if they are, they'll have to be taken care of somewhere. And this pot of money, I guess it would be pretty attractive to dip into if they're able to. So those are my 2 cents.
And I think psychologically and ethically, when you look at, okay, we're talking about the older generations when you're talking about these kind of funds necessarily. And so, we already have the stigma of Social Security isn't going to be around. And now you have people who have relied upon the apparent certainty of a pension fund, a public pension fund, and having put in, a lot of times their time with the government, whether it's state or local or even federal. So I think there would be a propensity to say that we have a moral and ethical obligation to get those where they were promised to be essentially. But, you know, there's the whole Social Security promise as well. So who knows at that point? But I think that on the private side, I don't think that the federal government is going to insert themselves in that problem. And I think that it's, but again, Jack theory, I think that they would do other things that are more, more global or more national than saying, okay, this company, this company, this company, and this is how, because it would be disproportionate, because then you have issues of, you know, was there already a problem with the pension plan? If it's if they're qualified plans, that, you know, was there already a problem, and are you funding something that should have been funded otherwise? So I think there's just too many problems on the private side of things. On the public side of things, if it happens, I think it's more of a moral and ethical feeling of responsibility by the federal government.
Yeah. Well, one thing just to remind people or alert people to, next week, we are going to go kind of back, unless something crazy happens in Washington, D.C., then we may have to do an audible, but which is what we did last week. We were going to have Russell Hughes on, and Russell Hughes is a commercial real estate guy, and he's really good in being able to kind of identify what kind of moves should you be thinking about and moving on, and what's happening in the marketplace. Even though he went to Michigan, he's a pretty he's pretty insightful and always opinionated, but he's really good. So anyway, he will be on with us next week, Lord willing, unless again, you know, something crazy happens out of Washington that really matters even more to you guys. But we will have him on, and we're planning on it for next week. And anybody that came on here late, we will publish this thing on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon, so you can watch all the fun and frivolity, and the fact that, you know, Joe had to remind us to turn on the chat feature again. I don't know why. The latest upgrade, and Zoom did this morning at 10:40 a.m. decided it needed to install updates, but it didn't uninstall that update on the chat. So sorry about that. Any other questions for you guys? I mean, we've got Jack. Any legal stuff? Even it doesn't have to deal with this IRA, which I think that acronym is funny. the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. Oh, okay, yeah. It doesn't have to pertain to that. And same way with on tax stuff. We've got one of our 3 big brain tax strategists, John McCarty. He's also a business owner, so he knows what it's like risking his own personal capital. One thing that I think would be interesting, and I've heard some chatter on this about, you know, a lot of the economists and whatever that are on, you know, in the current administration, and I think you could probably put this on pretty much every administration, but the lack of business owners, people that, you know, they're ivory tower people that have never had to cut their own salary to make payroll. And I just think that's sad when we've got people that are theoretically leading. And think back to when you're in college or any school, the teachers that you likely had, that you liked the most, had practical knowledge and experience and stories from the trenches of the workforce, of doing what they're teaching about. So I think we'd go a long way to make sure that we just have business people that are helping craft policy, because theory, it'd be like hiring a coach that's never run a business, but they got a PhD, you know, they've been in school forever. Nah, not for me. So anyway, just a thought. Any other questions out there before we shut her down a little early, maybe? Jack, you have any trivia? I mean, you did give away a $10 card. I mean, I don't, and the tax man is coming after your wallet, so you may want to save those cards. But, you know, I hate saying it, but I kind of miss a dad joke.
I
mean,
was-
they're
I-
bad.
You told me I couldn't, so I didn't prepare any.
I was just shaming you. I didn't say you couldn't. I was just shaming you.
Yeah, but you guys don't even do it like a polite laugh, so it's like,
I'll do a
whatever,
golf
so.
clap.
All right, I will revamp my because I had a calendar. I think you know this, right? So I had a calendar on my desk at home that had a dad joke every day, and that's where I would pull from. And now I don't have that anymore. So, but there's plenty of lists of dad jokes out there. Trust
yeah.
me. So yeah. So long as and maybe I need to have everyone sign a waiver so that when you roll your eyes and you injure your vision, that you don't take it out on me. So a liability waiver. Yeah. So yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of eye rolls, and I miss those. So yeah.
I think it was Joe with the whole, stormwater reclamation or whatever that made me think of this. So my son was a consultant in the water space. So he worked actually with coal mines in Kentucky. He lives in Kentucky, went to Lexington to UK, so SEC guy, and did a lot of that. And then the war on coal kind of put the kibosh on a lot of their stuff. So he transferred to another consulting firm, and now he's working for the state of Kentucky in their water conservation. And like he does a lot of really interesting things. But I saw this thing. I sent it to him, and it was on Instagram. I think this guy's on TikTok. I don't know, but he says, just because we're from Kentucky does not mean we are all dumb. And I sent this to, have you seen this one, Jack?
No, but I'm thinking about there was a video of the first roundabout in the state of Kentucky and people trying to use it. But go ahead. Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna play it for you. Let's see here. Hold on. Watch the cards.
Are you asking what song that is?
No,
Oh.
it's
Oh,
Journey.
the card.
Just because we're from Kentucky doesn't mean we're all dumb. He keeps moving the back card.
The back card, yes.
And I was thinking, because these poor people have been, part of Eastern Kentucky has just been ravaged. I mean, it's poor area anyway. It's really tough. And so I'm thinking, oh man, this thing came across my feed, and then I see this guy pulling the cards behind. I laughed out loud. I was crying. I said that to my son. I go, oh my gosh. And this guy evidently has his own thing going on now. Marriage advice and all kinds of funny stuff. So
there
enough.
was a video. Digress. Well, there was a video when South Charlotte in the Marvin area, there's 2 new roundabouts, newer.
Oh, right.
Which, thank goodness. I mean, it was just a crash or 2 a day just because it was 2 very dangerous intersections. And so someone posted on Nextdoor a video, and it was an intersection in Kentucky of a brand new roundabout, and people did not know how to use it. And it was kind of like, don't do that. But it's funny to see, but actually I think it kind of got people's defensive driving up. It's like, okay, that actually could happen if people don't understand how a roundabout works, because they're actually 2 different kinds. There's a double lane roundabout and there's a single lane roundabout, and you have to do things differently, and the yielding is different. And so anyway, so yeah, that was a meant to be funny, but I think informative video of what not to do in a roundabout. So
yeah. Well, and if you want to do these really sad, videos where you're doing cards, pull the front card off. So, anyway, you guys have been good. Thank you again, John. I hope you enjoy the concert, and kudos to you for taking care of your wife in such a cool way like that. I like that. Jack, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
And so next week, Russell Hughes, Jack, Adam, and yours truly. Thank you for joining us. And if you have questions along the way, in the meantime, feel free to email me, gfrey@trustbgw.com, and I'll make sure that we queue them up for next week. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And thank you for joining us. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.